Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're stepping back into a moment when America itself really just hung in the balance.
Hmm.
Imagine a nation teetering, right on the edge, where a single election outcome basically fractured a union that had stood for generations.
It's hard to overstate the tension, the debates, the fateful decisions. It was all happening so fast.
Absolutely, the air thick with it. So, our mission today is to take a deep dive into that specific moment. The presidential election of 1860, Abraham Lincoln's, well, pretty unexpected victory, and then the immediate, really dramatic cascade of Southern states leaving the Union.
Right. And we really want to unpack the effects of Lincoln's election, but maybe more importantly, explore the motivations behind why the Southern states decided to secede.
And crucially, we're drawing exclusively from the source material they provided, like their own declarations, the words of their leaders. We're not speculating here.
Exactly. And maybe the place to start is the central fact. Lincoln won on a free soil platform. Now, this was critical.
Free soil. Explain that a bit more.
It meant he advocated preventing the expansion of slavery into new territories. But, this is key, it did not mean advocating for its abolition where it already existed.
Okay.
But even that position, which seems maybe moderate to us now, was still seen as radical in the South. And his victory, well, it happened without a single Southern electoral vote. That was a political earthquake.
A total shockwave. So, okay, let's unpack this. Abraham Lincoln, the Republican candidate, wins in 1860. His platform, as you said, stops slavery spreading into new territories.
Correct.
But here's where it gets really interesting and maybe often misunderstood. Lincoln's actual stated goal wasn't ending slavery where it was already established.
No, he was quite clear on that, especially in those famous debates with Stephen Douglas.
Right. He actually told Southerners, pretty emphatically, that if he was elected, they could breathe easy about slavery in their existing states. His focus was stopping the spread.
It's a vital distinction.
Yep.
And it kind of begs the question, why did his election cause such alarm, such, well, panic in the South, despite those assurances?
Yeah, what was the disconnect?
Well, part of the answer, a big part, lies in the Democratic Party itself. It was deeply, irreparably divided.
Oh, right. They weren't unified at all.
Not even close. Historically, they were this national powerhouse, but by 1860, they were completely fractured.
So you had the Northern Democrats. Who was their guy?
Stephen Douglas. He was pushing popular sovereignty. Basically, let the residents of new territories decide for themselves about slavery.
Sounds like a compromise, maybe.
On the surface, maybe, but it was incredibly divisive. Because then you had the Southern Democrats. They nominated John Breckinridge.
And their position.
They demanded federal protection for slavery in all new territories. Full stop. They argued popular sovereignty could only happen after statehood, when slavery had already potentially taken root.
So a fundamental disagreement on when people could decide.
Exactly. And it just tore the party apart. Our sources mentioned that this internal division made the opposing Southern Democrats pretty twitchy. It completely undermined their ability to win.
Which, in turn, sort of cleared the path for Lincoln, even without any Southern support.
Precisely. But even with his sort of moderate stance on where slavery already existed, the win itself, it just sent shockwaves. What was it specifically that triggered such immediate, such extreme alarm?
That's the million-dollar question.
Well, try to put yourself in the collective mindset of the South then. They saw Lincoln's election, remember, a Republican who wasn't even on many Southern ballots, as absolute proof.
Proof of what?
Proof that their political power within the Union was just gone.
Yeah.
Irrevocably lost. Even deploying all their political muscle in a huge election like this, they couldn't prevail nationally.
Wow. So it wasn't just about losing an election, it was about losing their entire influence.
It felt like it. It was perceived as this irreversible shift in the country's direction, politically, morally, everything.
And that realization must have felt incredibly threatening to their whole way of life, their social structure, their economy, all built on slavery.
Absolutely devastating. And you have to remember the context. Things like John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry had happened just the year before.
Right. The abolitionists who tried to start a slave revolt, that terrified Southerners.
Terrified them. They saw it as a direct attack, proof that the North actively wanted to incite violence and upend their society.
So you have this loss of political power, this perceived existential threat to slavery, this fear of uprisings.
Exactly. It all culminated in this kind of dire conclusion for many in the South. The sources quote them asking, how much longer can we survive in this union? And the answer they came to was, no longer.
It wasn't just about Lincoln the man then. It was about what his election symbolized.
It symbolized a systemic shift they believed would inevitably lead to the destruction of their slave-based society.
And that conclusion led, well, incredibly quickly to action, a real unraveling of the Union.
Breathtakingly fast.
Yeah.
Within weeks of Lincoln's election, and get this, before he was even inaugurated, the nation started to break apart.
South Carolina went first, right? They were always sort of the most defiant.
Always at the forefront. They didn't waste any time. Seceded in December 1860.
December. Wow.
And the speed is just remarkable. Within 6 weeks, just 6 weeks after South Carolina, 6 more states followed. Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Gone. Just like that.
A cascade.
Each one a deliberate act, severing ties with the United States.
And they didn't just leave, did they? They immediately started building something new.
Right away, they formed the Confederate States of America and their new Constitution. Well, it's incredibly revealing about their priorities.
How so? Was it totally different from the U.S. Constitution?
In form and language, actually quite similar. But there were these 2 huge differences that really tell the story.
Okay, what were they?
First, it severely limited federal power. That reflects that deep distrust of a strong central government, especially when they now saw as hostile.
Makes sense, given the context. And the second?
More to the point, and really significant, it included provisions that enshrined slavery as a perpetual institution. It explicitly said it could never be abolished.
Never be abolished. Not just protected, but made permanent.
Perpetual. World without end, as some sources put it. It wasn't just about preserving the status quo, it was about locking it in forever.
That's a very clear statement of ideology, not just economics, but belief.
Absolutely. And interestingly, that wasn't the end of the secession wave. There was a second group of states.
Right, this was after the actual fighting started.
Exactly. After the attack on Fort Sumter and Lincoln's call for troops to put down the rebellion, that's when Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina joined the Confederacy.
So their decision was maybe less about the election itself and more about not wanting to fight fellow Southerners.
It seems that way. They were pushed over the edge by the reality of war, the need to choose sides in an actual conflict.
And Virginia's decision was a big deal, wasn't it? I remember reading it hesitated.
Hugely significant. Virginia was torn. You had this long loyalty to the Union versus defending Southern institutions, the threat from Lincoln, but ultimately they sided with the Confederacy.
And that made the Confederacy much stronger.
Immensely. Politically and geographically, Virginia was the most populous Southern state, had the most industry, a strong military tradition.
And Richmond became the capital.
Right, strategically located near D.C. Plus, the symbolic weight was enormous. Virginia, home of Washington, Jefferson, the sort of birthplace of the nation. Its secession gave the Confederacy a kind of legitimacy boost.
That makes sense. It wasn't just about resources, but history and status. So, okay, we've outlined what happened, the election, the secession waves. Now let's get to the core, the why. Why did they leave?
Yeah, this is the question that gets debated endlessly, isn't it? You hear arguments about states' rights, economic issues, tariffs.
But what do the sources we're looking at today, their own words, tell us?
Well, the striking thing is it's really not a mystery when you read what they wrote. While people argue about it now, the Confederates themselves were remarkably clear.
So forget the modern interpretations for a second. Let's hear it from them.
Let's look at Texas's Declaration of Secession. It's pretty blunt.
What did it say?
It charged the federal government, now controlled by Republicans, with proclaiming, and I'm quoting here, the debasing doctrine of the equality of all men, irrespective of race and color.
Debasing doctrine of equality. Wow.
They called it a doctrine at war with nature, in opposition to the experience of mankind, and in violation of the plainest revelations of divine law. They explicitly accused Republicans of aiming for the abolition of Negro slavery, and, crucially, the recognition of political equality between the white and Negro races.
The language is just stark. It directly links leaving the Union to preventing racial equality.
Leaves very little room for doubt about their core fear, doesn't it? Yeah. And South Carolina, their declaration was maybe more complex legally, arguing about constitutional rights.
But what was the focus?
It was, as the analysis puts it, focused like a laser on the Northern sympathies with anti-slavery principles. They charged that the Republicans would take possession of the government, that the South shall be excluded from the common territory, and ultimately that a war must be waged against slavery until it shall cease throughout the United States.
So even their constitutional arguments were fundamentally about protecting slavery from this perceived threat.
Inextricably tied to it. And then you have Mississippi. Their declaration is maybe the most direct.
What did Mississippi say?
Just this, quote, "Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world."
thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery. Can't get much clearer than that.
No ambiguity whatsoever. It forces you to confront these attempts, often politically motivated even today, to kind of downplay slavery's role. Their own words make it central.
It's powerful hearing it directly. And there's one more key piece of evidence, right? From the Confederate leadership itself.
Yes. Alexander Stephens, the vice president of the Confederacy, his cornerstone speech in March 1861.
Why cornerstone?
Because he explicitly laid out what he saw as the ideological cornerstone, the absolute foundation of their new government.
Yeah.
And it's chilling.
What did he argue?
He argued flat out that the Confederacy was founded on the principle that slavery and white supremacy were the natural and proper condition of black people.
The natural and proper condition.
He actually said, our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea to equality. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. He called it a great physical, philosophical, and moral truth.
Wow, he didn't just defend slavery as an economic system, he framed it as the basis of their society, a moral and philosophical truth.
Exactly. It wasn't just an interest they were protecting, it was their core ideology. His speech, as our source highlights, showed this deep ideological commitment of Southern leaders to maintaining slavery. Secession was explicitly about protecting this institution.
The perpetual institution, as the Constitution said.
Yes. And it wasn't just about labor, it was the foundation, the cornerstone of their whole vision for a white supremacist society. That's a profound point that sometimes gets lost.
It really is. It's sobering to think that a political election, even with Lincoln's careful public stance, could trigger such a fundamental break based on such an explicit ideology.
It shows how deeply intertwined slavery was with their entire identity and political power structure. Lincoln's election wasn't just a policy change. It signaled the end of their dominance, and, they feared, the eventual end of their way of life.
So when we put all these pieces together, the state declarations, Stephen's speech, what's the inescapable conclusion?
Well, if you just listen to the words spoken by the states themselves and by their highest leaders, the answer seems unavoidable. The institution of slavery and the white supremacy that underpinned it had to be protected at all costs, world without end, as they put it.
It's really impossible to read these primary sources with an open mind and conclude it was primarily about something else, like tariffs or abstract states' rights.
The evidence from their own mouths is overwhelming. The declarations, Stephen's speech, they demonstrate pretty clearly that the primary driving motivation for secession was preserving and perpetuating slavery and white supremacy. It was absolutely central.
And that, everyone, brings us towards the end of this deep dive. We've traced how Lincoln's 1860 election, won without Southern electoral votes on that free soil platform, acted as the immediate spark.
The catalyst.
But more importantly, we've heard directly from the source material the state's own declarations, the Confederate vice president's frank admission that the bedrock motivation was the preservation, the perpetuation of slavery, and the ideology of white supremacy.
It's all right there in their own words.
So as you think about all this, as you process these frankly stark statements from the past, we want to leave you with a question to mull over.
Yeah, consider this. Given these clear, explicit statements from the Confederate states and their leaders, how does this direct understanding of secession's foundational principles maybe challenge or perhaps confirm your own views on why the Civil War happened?
And maybe more broadly, what implications does really confronting this history, in their own words, hold for how we understand our past and maybe even our present?
Something to think about.
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this look into the sources has offered a clearer picture of a truly pivotal moment. Until next time.